In 1935, Universal Pictures released what many consider to be not only the greatest of their monster movies, but one of the greatest films of the 1930s. Bride of Frankenstein, directed by James Whale, was more than a horror sequel. It was a daring, subversive, and strangely beautiful film that challenged audiences, defied Hollywood censors, and transformed the image of the movie monster forever. Nearly a century later, it still feels fresh, shocking, and deeply moving. This is the story of how Bride of Frankenstein became the monster movie that was too smart for Hollywood. To understand Bride of Frankenstein, we first have to go back to the beginning. Universal had already struck gold with Frankenstein in 1931. Directed by Whale and starring Boris Karloff as the monster, the film was a sensation. It terrified audiences, made Karloff an instant star, and cemented Universal's place as the studio of horror. A sequel was inevitable, but Whale was not immediately interested. He felt he had already said what he wanted about Mary Shelley's creation. Yet as the studio pressed forward, Whale realized he could turn the sequel into something more ambitious. Instead of simply repeating the scares of the original, Whale used Bride of Frankenstein to blend horror with satire, black comedy, religious commentary, and a surprising dose of empathy. The film begins with a prologue that few modern viewers expect. We're not immediately thrown back into the Gothic castle or the burning windmill. Instead, we see a dramatized scene of Mary Shelley herself, played by Elsa Lanchester, speaking with Percy Shelley and Lord Byron on a stormy night. In this framing device, Mary explains that her tale of Frankenstein and his monster was not finished, and she begins to tell the rest of the story. This literary opening reminds the audience of the story's origin, but it also allows Whale to frame what follows as myth, as something larger than a simple monster picture. We return to the burning windmill at the end of Frankenstein. The villagers rejoice, believing the monster has been destroyed, but of course he survives. Karloff emerges from the shadows, staggering, growling, terrifying the locals. But from the very start of the sequel, Whale does something new. He slows the camera down. He gives us long, lingering shots of Karloff's face. This monster is not just a brute or a menace. He is pitiful, confused, and profoundly lonely. Where the first film portrayed him as dangerous and childlike, here he begins to develop awareness. He is no longer a silent monster. He speaks, and in his simple words, friend, friend. We feel his pain more clearly than ever. Loneliness is the heartbeat of Bride of Frankenstein. Again and again, we watch the monster reach out for connection only to be rejected. He is hunted by villagers, chained by guards, and mocked for his appearance. Yet when he encounters kindness, we see glimpses of humanity. The most famous of these scenes, of course, is his meeting with the blind Hermit. In a forest cabin, the Hermit takes the monster in, feeds him, and teaches him words. Friend. Good for a few precious moments, the monster experiences acceptance. He smokes, he eats, he listens to music, and tears fall from his scarred face. The tenderness of this sequence is unlike anything in a horror cinema of the time. In fact, it was so moving that censors in some regions demanded it be cut, claiming that it encouraged sympathy for a creature that should have been condemned. That reaction proves just how radical Whale's vision was. But Bride of Frankenstein is not only a story of loneliness and rejection. It is also a satire of power, authority, and human arrogance. Dr. Henry Frankenstein, played again by Colin Clive, begins the film determined to abandon his experiments and live a normal life with his fiancée, Elizabeth. but his resolve crumbles when a new character arrives. Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger in one of the most memorable performances of the era. Pretorius is a thin, sly, almost skeletal man with a devilish smile and a taste for the macabre. He tempts Henry back into his experiments, insisting that they can create not only life, but a female companion for the monster. Pretorius is both comic and sinister, mocking religion while surrounding himself with bizarre creations. In one famous sequence, he reveals a set of tiny homunculi he has grown in jars, a miniature king, queen, bishop, and devil. The effect is both absurd and unsettling, a grotesque parody of creation itself. Whale laces these scenes with black comedy, ridiculing the idea of scientists playing God while simultaneously reveling in the spectacle of it. Pretorius represents unrestrained ambition and blasphemy. But he is also strangely delightful, a villain audiences can't look away from. As Henry and Pretorius work together, the monster continues his desperate search for companionship. He is captured, whipped, and chained, but he escapes again and again. Each time he reaches for humanity, he is spurned. Whale fills the film with religious imagery, crucifix-like poses, villagers with torches that echo witch hunts, and even a scene where the monster is tied to a stake, arms outstretched like Christ. These images suggest that the monster is not simply a villain. He is a martyr, a symbol of the outcast punished by society for being different. All of this builds toward the film's climax, the creation of the bride. The laboratory scene is a tour de force of Gothic cinema. The storm rages outside, lightning crackles, and Pretorius exclaims the now famous line, "The Bride of Frankenstein." In a moment of pure spectacle, Elsa Lanchester, who played Mary Shelley in the Prologue, is unveiled as the bride. Her hair streaked with lightning bolts, her movements sharp and bird-like. She instantly became an icon of horror. And yet, in one of the cruelest twists in horror history, the bride rejects the monster. She screams at the sight of him, recoiling in terror. The monster, crushed, realizes he will never find the companionship he craves. In his final act, he tells Henry and Elizabeth to flee while he pulls the lever that destroys the laboratory. "We belong dead," he declares, as the building collapses around him and the bride. This ending cemented the monster not as a villain, but as one of cinema's greatest tragic figures. He is doomed, not because he is evil, but because society cannot accept him. His yearning for love is eternal and unfulfilled. Bride of Frankenstein shocked Hollywood in 1935. Audiences had never seen a horror film with such a blend of tones: satire, comedy, tragedy, and terror all at once. Critics praised its artistry, even as some censors tried to suppress it. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned the film for blasphemous imagery. Scenes of Christ-like symbolism, Pretorius mocking the Bible, and the monster's sympathetic portrayal all struck nerves in an America still bound by the production code. Yet it was precisely these elements that gave the film its power. Whale's direction elevated the material far beyond pulp horror. His use of expressionist angles, chiaroscuro lighting, and surreal imagery created a visual masterpiece. The performances, Karloff's pathos, Thesiger's camp menace, Lanchester's unforgettable dual roles, gave the film a richness that few horror sequels have ever matched. But perhaps the most radical element of Bride of Frankenstein was its coded queer subtext. James Whale, one of the few openly gay directors in Hollywood at the time, infused the film with themes of outsider identity and forbidden desire. Pretorius, with his flamboyant manner and sly innuendos, has been read as a queer character, tempting Henry into a forbidden partnership. The monster's longing for companionship, his rejection by society, and his final act of self-destruction resonate with the pain of anyone cast out for who they are. For decades, queer audiences have embraced Bride of Frankenstein as a film that reflects their own struggles and yearnings. Today, the film is considered a masterpiece not just of horror, but of cinema itself. The Library of Congress has preserved it in the National Film Registry. Critics consistently rank it among the greatest films ever made, and its imagery, the lightning hair of the bride, the anguished face of the monster, the skeletal grin of Pretorius, remains instantly recognizable, endlessly referenced in art, music, and popular culture. What makes Bride of Frankenstein endure is that it is both terrifying and deeply human. It is a monster movie that dared to ask big questions. What does it mean to create life? What does it mean to be rejected? What is the cost of being different in a world that demands conformity? These questions are as relevant today as they were in 1935. In the end, Whale gave us more than a sequel. He gave us a story of loneliness, love, arrogance and despair wrapped in Gothic beauty. He gave us a monster who was too human and a film that was too smart for Hollywood censors to fully control. That is why Bride of Frankenstein is not just a classic horror movie. It is one of the greatest tragedies ever put on film.